Dia Guif Galera Cordia August Foilta Road. Welcome to be my guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lear Media TV, supporting the Samaritans, Limerick and Tipperary, Clare's Wish Foundation in Limerick, and Deel Animal Rescue in West Limerick. And my lovely guest today is all the way from Canada, and it's Annalise Schamuhn. Hello, Annalise.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very, very well. What's the weather like there? Is it?
It's sunny and nice. Yeah, we're just moving into summer now.
Gosh, well, it's raining here. Well, it's never far away from raining because we're out in the Atlantic Ocean. So we have one of the wettest climates in the world, and it's miserable when it's miserable. But Annalise, you have a remarkable story. You were an officer in the Princess Patricia um, regiment, wasn't it? Am I right? In
My husband was in the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. I was a logistics officer in the Army.
logistics officer.
Hmm.
And tell me your story. You were in it for. You actually trained there as well. You did courses in psychology and you did course in honors English there. In the what made you want to decide to go into the army?
Oh, actually, I really went into the Army because it offered a free education. And so, yeah, I went to the Royal Military College, and that's where I studied first English literature, and then a few years ago, I went back to study psychology. Um, but yeah, then after I graduated and really like got into the working in the Army, then I really enjoyed it, and I was glad that even though it wasn't the reason that I got in, it all worked out.
I should have thought of that myself. I did English literature as well. Um, uh, I did it for my PhD, but I should have joined, although I'm only 4'10", so I don't think I'd probably have made it to the army. I'd probably have been like Private Benjamin in the army. But it's a tough life, is it, for women, physically as well as being accepted. Um, or did you find it easy to be accepted within the I'm not sure. I could imagine men taking it or finding it easy to take orders from a woman.
Mm. Yeah, it completely depends on the person. I think some people come in with baggage or with, maybe self-esteem issues, and they might feel threatened by a woman doing a job that, I mean, anything in the Army is sort of like typically male dominated. And so I think some people who sort of joined the military to express themselves as a man might struggle working with a woman, but then there's also a whole lot of guys who just always treated me great and always had my back. So
Yeah.
it doesn't take very many individuals to make it awful sometimes, but I wouldn't say that it's the majority of individual people. Hmm.
So your husband Kevin was very Irish name. Any Irish background there in Kevin's family?
No, no, not at all. Not that I know of.
I have to search that out because it's a very
Yeah.
very Irish name. But Kevin is a retired major in
Mhm.
the army, Canadian Army. Um, very young to retire, or is it normal to retire at that age?
Um, well, I guess the army is a bit of a young person's game. But yeah, he had 20, I guess 23 years in the military. So it's kind of a full career in one sense, but yeah, it is also young.
Very young, but still, it affords you so much opportunities to take on new careers and to travel the world and to live this. As I said to you when I was talking to you on LinkedIn, almost off-grid lifestyle where you can just go in a camper van and travel the world really if you wanted to. And still have a career because you work helping people to get the best of themselves. through
Hmm.
work you do now. Maybe you tell me a little bit about the work you do now.
Yeah, well, I am a certified executive coach, but for me, my passion isn't really to work on the business side of things. It's more to help people develop into their best selves and to bring their full selves to work, and working on inclusive, safe cultures in organizations. That's something that I didn't have in the military, and it was the reason why I ended up leaving earlier than I would have liked. Yeah, it's the environment at work that really drives, in a lot of ways, our happiness and ability to thrive, even more than the content of what the work is itself. So.
And it's safe to say that your clients would come from all spectrums of life, male, female, every job situation, whether it's working in industry or whether it's working for themselves, where they find themselves situated in their own lives, how they view themselves as and their own importance in society, or their own relevance in society. We all struggle with a sense of lack of value, I suppose. And do you think that when we lack value in ourselves, we project that towards others? Do you think that
Oh,
others that we project that, and they reflect it off us, and then they see us as being less valuable? Do you think it starts with us?
I think, yeah, everything starts from within. Leadership definitely starts from within. And I work with a lot of leaders. Well, leaders can access executive coaching, but also when a leader can get comfortable in him or herself, then they can, like you said, like project that out and be more accepting of other people. Like the more compassion we have for ourselves, the more safe and compassionate an environment we can create, where it's okay to make mistakes and try new things without fear of, yeah, rejection.
Well, as a former leader of a platoon of men, not an easy job. And I mean, you're not exactly big and burly that you could physically defend yourself with an army of men. But how do you, when you're challenged, say, in physicality, how do you actually become a good leader? I would imagine you say it's not about power, it's not about raising your voice. I often wonder why army sergeants continuously feel that they have to shout at somebody into their face. What is the, surely they can get their point across, and they can be a leader without having to be aggressive. Um, what would be your suggestion, having come from a male dominated environment and having been a leader in one of those male dominated environments? I would imagine that you would suggest that there's alternative ways of leading without being aggressive, either vocally, physically, or any other way.
Yeah, I really did feel encouraged to, I mean, more than encouraged to lead in an aggressive way when I was on training, and it was such a bad fit for me. So for a long time, I did feel like I was trying to lead in a way that wasn't authentic to myself. And I thought I had to do that in order to fit in and survive in the environment. But finally, in the end, I did get more comfortable in my own skin and say, like, it's not worth trying to pretend to be someone that I'm not. And I don't actually believe that anybody responds well to an aggressive leader. Like that's not safe. That's not, nobody looks forward to going to work, and no one's their best self or bringing everything that they can bring in that kind of environment. So yeah, I ended up embracing my own authentic style.
And what was your own authentic style? I would imagine, from the little I know of you, I would imagine it would be based on encouragement and making the other person feel that they can get the best out of themselves as a soldier and as an officer, or a future officer, or a future anything, future business person, that it would be to make them feel good about themselves from within, rather than feeling threatened into doing something. I think if
Yeah.
you're threatened into doing a job, then that job isn't for you.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I would say that, like, I've been out of the military now for just over 10 years. And if I were to go back, I would still be a very different leader than who I was 10 years ago. I've thought about it, worked on it so much. And now my approach, and it's the same approach that I take with like clients, friends, my husband, all of my relationships. And that's really just like holding people capable to fulfill their own potential and to believe in people. And so to say, like, I accept you for who you are. I think you're capable of maybe even more, and to encourage that and help people to explore maybe what's getting in the way of that, but to really like believe in someone and to say, like, as you grow and become a different person, I'm still here for you. So
Yeah.
it's really built around like safety and attachment theory.
I think if people actually start to feel a sense of worth, a sense of personal worth, then they give more than you'll ever expect from them. And
Mhm.
I often wonder, is the army a breeding ground for training people to have a lack of confidence in themselves? Because when you see,
Mm.
my own cousin was a captain in the he was a colonel in the Irish army, but I just kind of often wondered, as I said, why the necessity for all this aggression? Yes, people are going out and they're responsible for someone else's life just as much as they are themselves. But I do think it has to work from within that person to feel that sense of responsibility from within, rather than them being forced into being responsible by being shouted at constantly with somebody's face as close as that to them shouting. You can't. I don't think you can actually make a person responsible, but I think you can educate them in empathy and responsibility, and that comes then from within.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we can coerce people. It's all about how we use our power. And there's old ideas about like the great man theory of leadership, and using power over people and to coerce, or to just get people to do what you want based on like rewards and punishments. But that never comes from within. That's just completely dependent on external inputs, right? Those reward and punishment inputs. And it only leads to people going along with it, or maybe not going along with it, but seeming like they are. And
Yeah,
so I'm much more a proponent of, I mean, it's a hierarchical organization, so power dynamics are built into it. But I'm more a proponent of um, power with people, or giving power, like empowering power to people.
yeah.
And then
That's
it's coming from
what I'm
within.
talking about, Annalise, because I mean, I suppose having gone through the convent education system myself with nuns, I appreciate, and I've always been somebody who believes in a uniform, believes in children having, every child in a school having the same uniform, because it creates that sense of parity. There's nobody looking at I was an only child, so therefore you'd obviously be able to have things that other children with 9 and 10 in a family wouldn't. And I mean, there's always the danger children will come to school in very, very expensive outfits, and you have another child who can't afford it.
Hmm.
Uniform, that sense of equality is there. Everyone looks the same. And then that sense of hierarchy, you know, that the Reverend Mother and all of and the whole way down, that you have to follow instructions. And I think that's good, because it teaches you when you go out in life, out in regular life, to take instructions from your bosses, to know what to wear when you go to work, to be able to follow rules and regulations. That part of the army, I think, is remarkable. And I do think, I'm not sure, do you have national service in Canada? Do boys and girls, when they reach 17, 18, have to join the army for 2 years like they did in the UK?
No, it's all voluntary.
Well, in the UK now, it was my dad and his brothers all did their national service, and they did away with it. And I think national service is wonderful, because there's a gap when students leave school, some who don't want to go to university, for maybe they don't at that present time. I think they should be encouraged to go into military service for 2 years and train, because they learn to get up at a certain time every morning, clean their clothes, be responsible for themselves and responsible for others. And then they come out with a more mature after the 2 years of training. I think that's something that do you agree with it, or don't you?
I think there's a lot of benefits to military training, and it is in some ways like moving from your parents' home into like another sort of parental transition, because you get a lot of direction, and things are like, they tell you when to go to the dentist and everything like that. And there is that sense of service, and a lot is asked of you, which is one thing that like the army really gave me, was like they kept on challenging me to do things that I didn't think I could do, and it built so much confidence and strength and I guess resilience in that way. And so there's definitely a positive side to it for sure.
Yeah, I know, like in Israel, everybody has to do, I think it's 2 years, men and women, when they reach a certain age. And as I say, they did it in the UK for many, many years. And there's a lot of talk about bringing it back again, because there's an age group there that could benefit from, when they're unemployed, they've just left school, they've finished their exams, and they don't know what to do with themselves. They can get a training, they can become engineers or doctors or teachers, or do honors English in the army like you did, and then they can come out and they're more mature, because let's face it, sometimes some children, their parents are very, very easy on them, and parents don't want to offend their little darlings, whereas they'd be offended when they join the army, and it toughens them up in some respects. But things turned pretty awful for you in 2013, and maybe you would like to tell us about that, Annalise.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it goes way back actually to the beginning of my military service in 1997. And I guess it sort of culminated maybe in 2013, but just in the military, there are power dynamics, and a certain type of use of power is encouraged, and people are often promoted more based on their ability to have power over people than to have power with, or to use their power in that sense. And so sometimes this can lead to toxic environments in the military. And so one of the ways that this manifests is with the sexual assault crisis that we're really in right now. I mean, it's a public crisis. It's not that it has suddenly changed, but now we're seeing a lot of it in the news here in Canada. So yeah, this is one of the ways that the toxic power dynamics can really play out. And a lot of women end up being, and men end up being victims of sexual misconduct, sexual violence. Um, so for me, though, back to your question, in 2013, I was sexually assaulted by someone that I had formerly served with and someone that I thought of at that time as a friend.
Because you have you were saying that the regiments are made up of three platoons. Am I right? Is that the way it is?
Okay.
Everybody wears the same badges, and it's almost like
Yeah.
family within a family within a family within a family of the army, and
Mm,
everybody is, and you feel that much that more betrayed, because it's almost like you've been betrayed by a family member,
mm,
somebody that you would have been expected to die for
mm.
in
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So in Canada, there are 3 infantry regiments, and my husband was in the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry Regiment. And the person who assaulted me was also in that regiment. So, and they had deployed together to Afghanistan. I had done training with this individual as well, and so yeah, the it wasn't just anyone. It was someone that I thought I could trust. And the military really teaches you, like, these are your brothers in arms, your brothers and sisters in arms. These are the people who are going to have your back. And it's a narrative, and there is truth in it, but it's not a hard and fast rule, obviously, as I learned.
And it didn't happen just once, sure it didn't. It happened twice, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's right. There were 2 separate instances where I woke up in my own bedroom and he was there. He had come into my house, and I mean, this is someone that I I trusted. Um, so yeah, to wake up basically being sexually assaulted. Um, I don't even have words for it. I've thought about it and talked about it to a lot of people recently since we told our story publicly, but I still don't have words for that.
What would come? It's a really rhetorical question, but what would come into somebody's mind to think of um, invading somebody else's private home? Your home wasn't on the within the camp or within the army base. Your home was separate from, and he just came to your home and knew that you were going to be on your own at that time.
Yeah, he did know, like, he was good friends with my husband. They had served together, and he knew that my husband had just left on military training. And the first time he did this, it was that same week that my husband had gone away. So, yeah, what possesses someone? I mean, um, I think that when someone is able to use their power in a certain way for many years in the military, or elsewhere, this is not a specific military thing, but the hierarchy and culture in the military does have a tendency to amplify some of these issues. But when someone gets away with using their power over other people in a negative way for such a long time, then they do start to feel like they're entitled or they're immune to any kind of consequences.
It's funny that they say that most sexual assaults are committed by somebody you know, rather
Hmm.
than somebody which is one would think that that is strange, that when you're in danger of actually being able to recognize the person who assaults you, why would they take that chance? But having been assaulted the first time, did you report it?
I did not know.
Did you say it to your husband at the time?
I didn't tell him. In my mind, I mean, this kind of behavior is not uncommon in the military. So it felt, in one sense, as awful of it as it was, it also had a familiarity to it. And I thought, well, sometimes people, when they're drunk, they make mistakes and they become inappropriate. Like for so many years in the military, it had been almost normalized. And so I
Yeah.
didn't immediately think like, oh, I need to report this.
Yeah.
And the individual came over to my house the next day and apologized.
Yeah.
And I can't say apologized because it wasn't an apology, obviously, but made excuses and
Used his behavior.
exactly. Yeah.
Was drunk.
Yeah. And well, not only that, but he in some way thought that he was testing me on behalf of his friend to see if I was going to be faithful to my husband while he was away. It was a crazy story. Like this couldn't actually be what someone would think, but this was the crazy excuse that I was given. So yeah, I didn't really even think to report it.
So moving on to the next occasion that it happened. It happened not long after that again.
I could never remember when it was. There wasn't like a date that anchored it. I just know that it happened again sometime later.
And much the same way, just came
Yeah.
into you while you were on your own again.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was basically the same thing, although there's a tendency for these things to escalate. So the second time was more intense and scarier for me. But yeah, it was very similar.
And at what point did you decide, Annalise, to tell your husband and to tell your commanding officer?
Mm. Well, I was out of the military at the time, so I didn't have a commanding officer. And my husband and this person continued to have a relationship. This person was struggling with mental health issues and um, alcoholism, and ended up going to rehab unsuccessfully. But there was still a relationship between my husband and him, and my husband wasn't like he was away a lot, and so he wasn't seeing a lot of the dynamics and really wanted to still help his friend. And this is something, again, that goes back to military culture, but also broader culture is like you want to have someone's back. You want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And it's hard to think ill of someone. It's hard not to give someone the benefit of the doubt when they're your friend and you don't want to believe that things aren't safe. And also, one thing that comes up I find a lot when I'm speaking with people about this is if I think of myself as a good person, I don't want to think of ill of others. So if I don't give someone the benefit of the doubt, what does that say about me? So again, it's coming back to our relationship with our own selves and within. But yeah, my husband maintained that relationship.
You don't want to be judgmental, and because you were all part of this one family, you're saying to yourself, a family member is in trouble, whether it's through alcoholism or making seriously bad decisions and
Mm,
detrimental decisions for one member of the dynamic. But you still want to be there for them, because that's what you've been trained to be, is there for your army family member. I mean, this is a person that if you were in battle in the morning, you would be expected to give up your life for,
mm, mm,
in order to save, and he has molested you twice.
mm.
And at what stage did it escalate to the point that it went legal?
Um, well, about a year and a half after these incidents took place, then my husband did start to see the issues in this person's life and felt that they were no longer compatible as friends, I can say. And
sorry for interrupting. Did he know before this that, had you told him before this that he had come in and attacked you?
No, I didn't feel comfortable telling my husband because he was sort of conflicted in a sense. There were other things going on, but he was very committed to helping his friend, and I didn't feel that he would be able to hear what I was saying, like objectively, and so I just couldn't tell him. So it wasn't until he didn't end the friendship exactly, but he did tell this person that it wasn't a compatible situation. They were going down different roads in their own lives.
Yeah, he distanced himself. And at that stage, you felt comfortable to say, this is what he's done to me.
That's
Because
right.
you felt you weren't breaking up a family dynamic.
That's right.
That's all back to the training of, this is your family. This is the family that'll do anything for you, and they're there for you through thick and thin.
Yeah, that's right. It is all very, like, yeah, like you said, I never thought about it that way, but it is, you don't want to break up the family. Yeah.
Yes, like breaking up to a brother and sister, or 2 brothers,
Mm-hmm.
and and a sister coming between the 2 brothers and splitting the family, and your brothers in arms, all of you. And but what did he think when you said? So he must have been horrified.
Yeah, well,
Horrified and not knowing, and he was stuck in the middle.
he had really arrived at his decision about their relationship independently. Like, I really stayed out of that because I mean, I had to. And then after I'll just call it the breakup of their relationship. What's that?
Their divorce.
Yes, they're divorced. And so then this person got very upset. He was very injured, insulted, felt judged, went out and got drunk, and then came over to our house and physically assaulted my husband. And so then I could say he had assaulted me, he had assaulted my husband, and I knew of one other person that he had also assaulted. And so, I mean, it's a pattern, right? Like, it's a clear pattern. So then I was able to confront this person and say, look, if you don't get help for your alcoholism, which is affecting other people, like, I mean, he had a family, then I'm going to report you. And at that time, I didn't believe that I was going to report him. It was a bluff. Like, I just wanted him to get help and to stop hurting people. And so that's when he went to rehab.
And hurting himself because and his family. So at what point did you realize that he wasn't listening to you?
We had an amicable parting when he went to rehab, and he was very apologetic and, wanted to maintain the relationship. We went out for lunch, and he just, like, he is a person who plays the victim very well, and he can really be very charismatic and sort of put on a show. And so it was on good terms, I'll say, when he went to rehabilitation. But then when he came home, he was very angry. So I guess fast forwarding to later, about the better part of a year after he went to rehabilitation, my husband had done a course in our hometown in the military. And it's tradition in the military, the last night of course, then you all go out and to a restaurant, have dinner together, and then have some drinks. And so he ended up at a pub where this individual also was there drinking. And Kevin thought, well, we can be in the same room. That's fine. So he was just over talking with his friends and course mates. And then this guy basically like flew at him across the bar and attacked him. And so the police were called, and he tried to make it out just to be like a bar fight, which if you know anything about my husband, like he's not that kind of guy. And it's funny, like he's in the army and everything, but he's quite a gentle soul. I've never seen him fight with anyone. So he was like, oh no, this was not a bar fight. And he, when the police were called, he said, no, I'm going in to make a statement. And it was at that time that he told the police what this person had done to me. And so the police called me and asked me to make a statement. And that's how I ended up reporting. I don't know to this day if he hadn't attacked my husband at that pub. I want to believe that I would have reported it, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, hindsight is 2020 vision, as they say. And the fact is that you had it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do for you. It was the right thing to do for your husband, and it was the right thing to do for him and his family, and potentially somebody that he might have gone even further in an assault with, or in harming or killing. I mean, he clearly wasn't suitable to be within a regiment, responsible for not only his own life but somebody else's life, until he took his own life in hand. And maybe that was the wake-up call. But General Daw, I'm just thinking of, I was shocked when I was actually reading about how General Daw actually gave a character reference for him. I understand, in retrospect, I understand that he would, because again, it's back to the family, keeping the family and staying loyal to your family members. But what about your family member who's been assaulted?
Yeah, this is the bewildering part of it, because General Daw is in the same regiment as my husband and the offender. But and this is what we do, like whoever we have the closest affinity to, or the deepest relationship, these are the people that we tend to like consider as our tribe, even our tribe within our tribe. And these are the people that we protect. And so I think he was just like, he felt, they had served together. And General Daw had been responsible for some deployments and stuff. So I just wonder, like, how there must have been some ways in which he felt, I don't know, responsible for this person's well-being, but somehow couldn't see past that relationship and couldn't just see, like, these are two members of my family. This one attacked this one. It wasn't somehow that black and white in his own mind, because relationships and the way we identify with people do cloud our judgment sometimes.
Like choosing one child over another.
Yeah, that is what it is.
It is, yeah, because in the hierarchical structure, he is the father figure.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
he is the father figure, and both of you were subservient, if you like, and were child figures to him, or he was responsible for both of you, and he chose to defend one against the other. He went into court and said that he was a good man and defended him. That must have really upset your husband, because both of them were in the same regiment, and your husband must have felt that was a betrayal in some way.
Absolutely. Yeah, he didn't physically go to court, but he did send a letter after the guilty verdict had been delivered, but before sentencing. So the intent was to influence sentencing, to say, like, this is a first offense. It's a good person. Don't go too hard on him. But yeah.
And he admit that afterwards to your husband, that it
Mhm.
was his intention to
Mhm.
influence the verdict.
That's right. Yeah, to influence the sentencing. Yeah,
Yeah,
after the
yeah,
verdict. Yeah,
yeah.
that's right. And so actually at this point, the offender wasn't in the same chain of command. He was working in a completely different area, but my husband was in the same chain of command as General Daw. They would see each other at work. Like there was only really one level between Kevin and General Daw at that point, like in their chain of command. So yeah, it was it. I mean, bewildering is really the word, and betrayal.
I suppose putting on my a balanced hat, there would be the argument that he was trying to defend a family member that he saw had potential, had been a good person, had made a mistake, and he was stuck between having to make that decision. But as I say, in doing so, he put his head above the parapet and he defended one person uh, against another member of his close family,
Hmm.
his subordinates that had been assaulted. Two members actually, when you think of your husband, and but you being, I suppose, physically less able to defend yourself against the attack than your husband, than Kevin. Um, One would expect that had he actually gone even further with you, you wouldn't have been able to physically defend yourself.
That's right. Yeah.
Potentially, you could have been killed.
Yeah. I could only use like my wit and my presence of mind to de-escalate the situation as much as possible. But yeah, physically there was nothing.
There's no comparison. Um, what was I going to say to you? What happened to him? Is he in the army now, or has he been released from the army?
um, he was released from the military after the court case. He was also implicated in another court case that I had mentioned where I knew he had assaulted someone else. And so he ended up going to jail for that one. But the military um, released him on not for misconduct, but for medical reasons. So when you're released for misconduct, there's no pension or anything like that. But when you're released for medical reasons, so in this case,
Alcoholism.
yeah, like mental health. Um, I believe. I mean, I don't know, but I believe it's like mental health. Then you're entitled to a medical pension and a lot of benefits and stuff like that. So they looked at this person. It seems like and said, well, he's a convicted sex offender, but he has mental health issues, and maybe they didn't look at it that clearly. Like in my mind, it's like, well, will we release him for medical reasons or for misconduct? And like, of course, I think it would clearly be misconduct, but
In
he
the
was released medically.
event that he attacks or assaults, God forbid, somebody else post leaving the army, who is responsible? Will the army be held responsible for releasing a man whom they knew sexually assaulted at least one woman and physically assaulted her husband, and then could potentially go on and harm somebody else, and they have released him following a full trial? They've released him on medical grounds. No,
Um,
no, I mean, if you put that into a civil case, not an army, a military, I presume it was a military tribunal,
no, it was in civilian court.
civilian court.
Hmm.
How did that happen? How was it civilian court and not because
Oh,
because you weren't in the army when he
yeah,
attacked?
and it wasn't on a military base, and I reported to civilian police, so it was completely a civilian matter.
Okay,
Mm.
okay, so the army, so he wasn't court-martialed.
That's right. That's right. So the military knew, obviously, like there were letters sent, but it wasn't a military tribunal.
Okay. So how do you feel about all of that now, Annalise?
Um,
Because it's not very long. It's not very long ago since the court case happened.
it was a few years now. Yeah. I think it was it was 4 years ago. Yeah, that the trial took place, and then there was appeals after, like it never really ends. But yeah, eventually the appeals were all lost or abandoned. And so really that's been within the last year that finally resolved.
Yeah.
So
And how do you feel about it? Do you feel betrayed? Do you feel that well, at least I have got it out there. At least he's no longer in the army. His life has probably been saved by you reporting it, because had he been in the army and gone to war, he could have ended up being killed because of he maybe drinking while he was on duty, or because of irrational behavior. So in some respects, you've probably saved his life as well as many others.
yeah,
By
there's a lot of hypotheticals, what could have been different, but like really, yeah, my thinking is more around other people who would have been harmed. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, by either abuses of power or physical assaults or just like poor judgment. Yeah. So how do I feel about it now? I did get a lot of closure going through the court proceedings. The detective that I reported to, like, believed me right away. I felt heard. I felt part of the process. Being able to like provide evidence for the trial, and then the trial ending in a guilty verdict was just so uncommon for sexual assault cases. So there was a lot of closure there. But then the military betrayal has really sat with us this whole time. And then just this year, when a number of sexual assault, like high profile sexual assault cases were in the media, we chose to tell our story publicly because we wanted to demonstrate that it's not just a few bad apples. It's not just a matter of figuring out, oh, who are the perpetrators of sexual assault and then getting rid of them. There's a whole system that protects people like this. And like, why would a general protect a convicted sex offender? Like all of these structural, cultural issues. And we just wanted to shed a light on that. And up until that point, too, it had kind of been seen as a woman's issue. But my husband was also a victim of violence, and not protected, was betrayed by the system. And so we felt that our story could really move the conversation past a few bad apples and a women's issue if we both told it together. And so since then, we have been able to like have a greater sense of healing from closure and justice. We were so well supported by everyone who read our story. Like we got just hundreds and hundreds of messages of support and thanks for telling our story. General Daw was removed from his position once it was seen that he had lost the moral authority to lead because of his decisions. And that sent a really strong message too. It's not just perpetrators who are held responsible, but it's the system, it's the enablers, and leadership. One of the definitions of leadership that I use in my own brain is like leaders create culture, like leaders create environments and are responsible for setting the tone. And so it's important, I think, to look at leadership not just as like getting people to do stuff, but also creating the environment.
You were asked to go back into the military to train people in how, I mean, I asked you at the outset of all of this interview, and there was a reason, I suppose, why I started with your training, and we were talking about the aggression that's that's aimed at young, say, subordinates, and that by the hierarchy, and if you were asked to go back into the army to actually do courses on dealing with people, getting them to be the best soldier they can be, the best officer, the best general, the best major, and so on down the line. Um, what would be your advice? Because there's clearly faults in the system, because you clearly don't put somebody into the army and scream at them orders and expect them to do things out of fear. I get that they're training them that when they're in a very, very hostile environment, that they can act, that their fight or flight, they go into fight or flight mode, that they can act rationally when they're being treated irrationally. I get all of that. But how do you think that the army can actually improve their way of dealing with subordinates who eventually end up being over other subordinates? Because it's a cycle of abuse. It's a cycle of abuse, really,
It
that there
is.
is correct. When you've always been brought up thinking that abuse is bad, suddenly you're in an environment where abuse is positive and seen as being positive. What
Yeah.
would you teach in that situation? How would you structure the army and the
Hmm.
army's?
Yeah.
Thinking again about Private Benjamin. I was thinking I'd be a real Private Benjamin, a brunette Private Benjamin. It's like
Yeah, military training is all based on doctrine. And so we're taught a certain definition of leadership, the roles of leadership. And so it really starts before training to say, like, how do we define leaders? And is it, how do they use their power, and who are we going to promote? Which, I mean, and by promote, I mean promotions in rank, but also, like, who are we going to encourage to continue to be that way? And so starting very early in our training, there's tons of ways of putting pressure and stress and realistic, pressure on people without being abusive.
exactly. That's
And
what.
so, yeah, so we can do that. Like, we can create a lot of stress while still treating people with dignity. And then when we're training our leaders, we can either continue to train them to have the right answer and follow a procedure and come up with a plan and make people follow their plan, which is the way I was trained, or we can train people to create an environment in which they get input, they get the best ideas. And yes, the leader is still 100% responsible for the outcome and the eventual plan, but they're also responsible for the well-being and the mental well-being of people after the mission is complete. So we can start asking questions like, when you were going through your plan, how did you make sure that everyone was able to contribute their best ideas? And how did you make everyone feel that they were contributing meaningfully? Because these things are important. Like, when we go into battle, people need to feel that if they see something wrong, they can speak up and they'll be heard. Not like, oh, well, I'll just go along with it, right? So this is about keeping people safe in a real physical way as well.
But I think, from looking at it from the outside in and looking at your story from the outside in, I think the message would be that when you go into the army, this is your family. Yes,
Mm,
this is your family. We're all a family. But if one of you harms the other, there are um, repercussions for that, and we will not stand by somebody who has sexually or physically assaulted another member of the family. Just because
Mhm.
you're family doesn't mean that it's like, I suppose, a parent going to the police when they find that their son has done something wrong and reporting their son or their daughter. It's responsible parenting, and the general is a parent, and the responsible action that General Daw would have done was to say, you're both my subordinates, you're both my family, but um, you have harmed one member of my family, and I'm not taking sides, but I'm going to stand in defense of the victim and not the perpetrator in situations like that. Um, was it at that point that Kevin decided to leave the army, or had he more or less decided before that, or had he to leave anyway?
Um,
He's
there's
because
a I would have to ask him what the percentage of factor was. I think for us, it was the right decision. Like it was the right time in our life for him to leave the military. But I th- this also was a big factor as well. Yeah.
and you decided to leave your homes and go on a camper van and
Yeah.
travel and live off grid. That it must be just so liberating.
Yeah. Well, with COVID, we haven't been able to travel as much as we wanted, but and
But you have
especially with
a home aside from the camper van.
what's
You,
that?
you have a home besides the camper van.
No, we rented over the winter because we couldn't. We were planning to go down south. It's hard to be in a van when it's freezing cold outside. It's warm enough, but like if you're not outside doing something to stay warm, then it's not a lot of space. So we decided, okay, we'll just rent a place for the winter, and then start traveling again in the summer. So that's what we're doing. But yeah, for me, I love the simplicity of it, and for Kevin, he loves he like his favorite part of it is just what it enables us to do, the places that we can go, and we both love being in the outdoors. So yeah, it's a great fit for us for now, and I'm still able to do all of my work remotely. COVID has actually helped with that. Like now we're all so comfortable
Yes.
working remotely too. So it has actually, yeah, been a pretty good fit for us this year, all in all.
Yeah, but it must be just great to just say, "Oh, I'm sick of being here. Let's go to, let's go to Toronto. Let's go to Ontario. Let's go to." I'm just picking out names in Canada that I know of. Saskatchewan. That's very cold, isn't it, Saskatchewan?
In the winter, yeah, yeah. It's the prairies. It's very cold.
Canada, but I had my father's first cousin was in the Gendarmerie Royale.
Oh,
He was a detective in for years, and always wanted to see Canada. One of the countries I've on my bucket list to see, but never got there yet. But I will eventually. But it must be great to just say, "That's it, Kevin. Let's go," and we'll head off to um, Toronto today, or wherever tomorrow, or and wherever the van takes us.
yeah, it's been great because in the military, and I'm really noticing this too. I've re-engaged with a lot more military people recently since telling our story, and there isn't a lot of time. There's almost no time when you're working in the military, and the more senior you get, the busier the job you get, to take care of yourself and to do introspection or just to breathe and relax. And like Kevin's done 4 operational tours overseas, and there isn't really ever enough time to recuperate. So this is a really important time in our lives to be able to do that and really like replenish ourselves in nature and in the mountains.
And how do you, when you're actually working on, I mean, as a counselor or somebody that people are unburdening their greatest traumas and things that they've never spoken to anybody about before, because they're tough army men and tough army women, and
Mm,
they're just not expected to have emotions. Really, they're expected to be, I suppose, Ottomans, if you like, just doing everything that they're told to do. Their life has been so structured and so, I suppose, in many respects, mechanical.
mm,
Get up every morning at this time, do this by this time, out here, follow instructions, don't question anything. And suddenly they're not in the army, and they're faced with their memories, and they're faced with traumas that have just probably come to the surface that they never really had. They're discussing it with you. How private can Zoom be, or how safe do they feel when they're actually talking to you?
mm. Yeah, normally when I'm in the van on Zoom, there's nobody else around. Um, Kevin and I will, like, we figure out our schedule, and he'll be out and about doing something, or if we're staying with friends, or yeah, just depending on where we are. Confidentiality is absolutely the most important part of people feeling safe. Now, I'm not like a trained psychologist or a social worker or anything like that. And
Experience.
sorry?
You have experience.
Yeah. So when I'm working with clients, our mental health is always part of the context in which we live. So, if someone is dealing with PTSD or anxiety, like, they need a therapist to help them through the mental health parts of that. But as we're talking about whatever it is that they're working on in their life, that can form part of the context. And so the purpose of coaching isn't to improve mental health, but um, but it but it factors into all of the things that we do, and it factors into roadblocks that we come up against. And so I definitely don't shy away from talking about it as an important part of the context when we're setting goals.
But sometimes a person can be a qualified psychologist and psychiatrist and psychotherapist and everything like that. But at the end of the day, what somebody wants, what people in many cases want, is a listening ear. Somebody who has experience of trauma themselves, experience of sexual abuse, experience of physical abuse, that they can draw from that to
Mm,
be. And in most cases, people don't want wise answers or wise solutions. They just want somebody to be a sounding board so that they can just talk to. So, when you say I'm not a qualified psychiatrist, I think many people just want someone to talk to that
mhm.
knows. And if they've been in the army and you've been in the army, they know that they're speaking to somebody who knows how they feel, a brother in arms or a sister in arms.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, there's really no like goal that we set for ourselves at work that is completely devoid of the context of the rest of our lives. Or if it's not a work goal, a personal relationship goal or whatever it is that someone's working on. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, we can start out a session thinking that it's about one thing, and we'll end up down a completely different, right? Because it's all from within.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so, yeah,
It's
it's,
much like this today.
yes.
Wander off into. But Annalise Schamuhn, thank you so very much for being my guest today. I wish you should call your name your business Sister in Arms.
Thank you.
But thank you for being my guest today. It was an absolute pleasure, and you're a brave woman to have done, and a righteous woman to have done what you did, because a lot of people have been assaulted and just haven't the courage. Eventually, they may, but everyone does these things when it's right for them,
That's
and
right.
choose not to because it's right for them as well not to. But you are brave to put your head above the parapet and say, you know, this was done to me, because no doubt you've saved many others in the army from experience the same thing. So
Thank you,
Shindera
Mary.
leis an clár, that's the end of the show for today. Until the next time, le cúnamh day. But wallam tú galéir tíocána sonas agus grá agus godé sibh slán. Bye, Annalise.
Bye. Thank you.